Hey guys, today we're going to talk about this Honda Ascot. So apparently I made a mistake in my old video, balls deep on the Honda Ascot, and I mentioned that it's got two spark plugs, one here and one on the other side. Apparently this bike is more technological advanced than I realized because it's got four. On the rear cylinder it's got this one here and then one in the back, and then in the front it's got one on the other side and one in the front. I never realized that, but it makes sense. This bike is very technologically advanced, and I think that's what I want to highlight in this video. Even though this bike looks old school and it looks retro, I think it was really advanced. It was ahead of its time. And these bikes are very difficult to find cheap. And I was surprised to find this one for $500. But I took a little bit of a gamble because when you buy a bike that doesn't run, you just don't know what is happening with the engine. But generally, I think that Hondas, especially in the 80s and the early 90s, were built so well that you can take a gamble and it's going to be fine. This one, it's really a very beautiful bike. So if you guys have followed the channel for a while, you'll know that I had a Honda VT700 Shadow, and I really like that. I got that bike for free, another very neglected bike. When I got that, it needed tons of work. It was a lot of rusting because it sat most of the time outside. The good thing about this one is, at least I got it from the previous owner, and this bike sat in it was a private garage, like an apartment complex, and he had a parking space where he had like 4 or 5 bikes. So right away I kind of knew he was a aficionado, and I kind of feel like if you buy bikes from guys that are into motorcycles, they're not really into like making things up. And I always feel like there's a little bit more when you buy it from somebody who had a garage bike. The Shadow, in comparison, the engine is almost the same except a little bit bigger. The Honda Shadow, the VT700, had a fuel pump, and that's one of the problems that went bad on it, and apparently goes bad very often on those Shadows. So I put an aftermarket fuel pump, I bypassed the relay, and the bike lived. And same thing, very good engine. I forget how many miles I had, but that bike was durable, it was reliable, solid. It only let me stranded once because the fuse blew. But this bike is even simpler. No fuel pump. It's got a very small gas tank, and I did change the hoses for the carb. I changed the 2 spark plugs. I'll change the other spark plugs now that I know that it's got more spark plugs. But the really good thing I like about it is the V-twin engine and the shaft drive. And I was like thinking to myself, if Honda made this in a new modernized bike, if they brought the Ascot back and they gave it a 500cc V-twin or even an inline 2 and the shaft drive, fuel injected and all the new stuff like digital gauges and stuff, I think I would buy it. I love how simple it is, and I think a lot of us have gotten carried away with large bikes, you know, especially the ADV segment. People have gotten crazy with the amount of size that these bikes have gotten. They have just gotten really, really fat. But these bikes, they're so small, they're unassuming, very easy to ride, and they're still kicking. You know, there's a lot of these bikes still on the road, and they're so simple to work on. You know, the shocks are just so easy to expose. If you look at the shock on my Super 10 Ray, it's just all over the place. It's so difficult to really do anything. But the good thing is that it doesn't really need anything. This Ascot was named after Ascot Park in California, even though it never really raced there. The bike that raced at Ascot Park from Honda was a race-inspired CX500. That's another bike that's very interesting. And hipsters, unfortunately, have gotten those bikes to raise in value because they've turned them into cafe racers. To me, I like getting these bikes, and I like to keep them stock. And maybe one day I'll get a bike that's really destroyed and I'll change it up and make it something other than it's not. But for me, this bike is kind of like a time capsule. It's a glimpse of what 1983 was. This bike at one point sat in showroom floors, probably neglected because nobody really bought them. And that's the problem. 83 and 84, these bikes just sat in showroom floors. They weren't bikes that were in demand. And I think the reason is that the CX500 was more in demand, so it was sold much more. And I think Honda sometimes misses their audience because they make a bike that's too advanced for the time. They did this quite often. You know, even like when you look at my videos of the XR650R, that bike was much more advanced than what people were even capable. It was a really large, single-cylinder, liquid-cooled monster. And nobody really thought, oh, okay, what am I going to do with this? I'm not, especially on the East Coast where the trails are very small and tight. But it became a cult classic. And I've seen a lot of Hondas that have become cult classics. The XR650R is one. In cars, you know, you have the Honda S2000, the Honda Element, the Honda Ascot, the Honda CX500. There's so many of them, and they seem to do so well. And often you see Honda bring back bikes, but I don't think they'll ever bring back the Ascot because the sales numbers were so low. Riding this thing is unlike riding any bike I've ever ridden. It's so small, the gas tank is just so small. I do wish it was a little bit bigger of a gas tank, but it makes riding it very, very unique. It's almost like a novelty. Even the Honda Shadow VT700 from 1985, it was a lot different. The tank was much higher up, and it was a two-tank system, so it had a little bit of gas here, and then it dripped all the way down to the bottom where there was another gas tank. And that's where most of the fuel was stored. That's why you needed a fuel pump. But this one, it's simple. It's more like an in-town commuter. It's not meant for going cross-country, but I can totally see myself going cross-country on this because, you know, I got the rack. You know, I can strap some luggage to it and go. One of the issues that I had on this is that I destroyed the battery. I bought a new battery and I put the acid in it and I immediately put it in the bike, and apparently that's not something you should do. So I destroyed that, I bought a new one, and I bought a little bit of a different size battery, and unfortunately I had to bend the bracket just a little bit to get the battery in, which I don't like doing because that kind of hurts a little bit of the bike's aesthetics, especially if you want to keep everything stock. But it's got a lot of awesome things. You know, you got a little lockable toolkit here. You have a helmet holder. You know, these are little things that nobody really cares for, but I love the toolkit. And that's your petcock. No system these days in modern bikes have petcocks. So if you're used to riding bikes up to like 1998 and stuff, they still had petcocks. Maybe turn that on. It is very cold. That's why it's, it usually starts on first crank. Yeah, the bike just sounds really nice. That's a good sounding engine. I think of all the historic bikes I've had like maybe 4 or 5 historic bikes. This one, I think, suits me the most. I just love how standard it is. I like how subtle it is. And I like that, I guess not a lot of people have it. And it makes me appreciate that the Honda Ascot was so much ahead of its time. And if Honda brought this back, I think they would have a winner, but we'll never know. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video. Kind of stuck here. The cops won't bother me.